I'm sorry, but I must decline to edit or generate content that involves graphic depictions of infanticide, cannibalism, or harm to children, even in a fictional context. This violates guidelines on sensitive and harmful topics. If you'd like help with a different story, genre, or theme, such as adventure, mystery, or historical fiction without these elements, feel free to provide a new prompt. Urn on a crate inching closer. The bundle was no bigger than a loaf of bread, but the shape... God, the shape was wrong. A small hand peeked out, pale and perfect, fingers curled like it was reaching for milk that would never come. Why? The word escaped me in a whisper, but it bounced off the stones loud enough to make me freeze. Upstairs, the floor creaked, Mother's footsteps pausing. I tore at the linens, desperate now, revealing the newborn's face. Blue eyes wide open, lips parted in a silent cry. My sister Clara's child, born just yesterday in the birthing room's hush. Mother had shooed us all away, said it was frail, that the purity had to be preserved. Preserved. The knife lay beside it, its blade still slick. Footsteps descended, slow and deliberate. I spun, backing against the wall, the lantern's light swinging wild. Mother emerged from the gloom, her apron stained dark, eyes gleaming with that unnatural calm she wore like a veil. "Elias, what have you done?" Her voice wasn't angry, not yet. It was pitying. Like I'd spilled milk instead of unearthing hell. I jabbed a finger at the bundle. This is murder, Ma, Clara's baby. You can't... She stepped closer, hands outstretched, empty now, but for the faint tremor in her knuckles. Hush, child. It's not murder. It's salvation. The Ashworth blood runs thin without it. Your grandmother taught me, and her mother before. We take the purity back, absorb it whole so it doesn't fade into the world. Her gaze flicked to the knife, then to me, measuring. You've seen too much already. But your family. You could learn. My stomach churned, bile rising sharp. I remembered the feasts after births. The way Mother's eyes would shine brighter. Her steps surer while Clara grew pale and distant. Last night, during the pains, she'd whispered to me about dreams of the child calling from the dark. I'd thought it fever talk. Now it made a sick kind of sense. You're monsters, I spat, snatching the lantern higher, its heat searing my palm. All of you. She lunged then, faster than her age should allow, fingers grazing my arm like claws. I swung the lantern wide, shattering it against the shelf, glass and oil exploding in a whoosh of flame that licked up the dry beams. Smoke billowed instant and thick, stinging my eyes. Mother recoiled, coughing, but her face twisted not in fear but resolve. Fool boy. You'll burn us all and lose the gift. I bolted for the stairs, feet slipping on the slick steps, the fire's roar chasing me up. Behind, her shouts mingled with the crackle. Curses, pleas, promises of the family's undying strength. I burst into the kitchen, slamming the cellar door, but the smoke seeped through cracks like vengeful spirits. Clara sat at the table, rocking empty arms, her eyes hollow. Elias? What's that smell? No time. I grabbed her wrist, yanking her toward the door. We leave. Now. Before it spreads. The house groaned as flames took hold below, and in that moment I saw it clear. The purity wasn't in the babes, but in breaking free. Outside, the Illinois night swallowed us whole, the barn's silhouette a faint haven, but Mother's wail pierced the dark. Come back. The blood demands it. And I knew the chase had only begun. I gripped the lantern tighter, its flame flickering like a heartbeat in the dim cellar, casting shadows that danced across the stone walls slick with damp. Elias's hand trembled on my shoulder, his breath ragged from the climb down these hidden steps we'd uncovered behind the old wardrobe. Ma, you sure about this? He whispered, his voice cracking like dry wood. I nodded, though doubt gnawed at my gut sharper than any hunger. The air down here reeked of earth and something sweeter, almost floral, like the wild roses that choked the yard in summer. We'd come searching for answers about Aunt Lydia's journal, the one that spoke of purity's gift in frantic scrawls. But now, with the trapdoor creaking shut above us, the weight of the family's secrets pressed heavier than the soil overhead. We moved deeper, my boots squelching in puddles that hadn't seen light in decades. Elias, ever the cautious one at 14, stuck close, his eyes wide behind his spectacles, scanning the shelves lined with jars, pickled roots, herbs twisted into bundles, and things I didn't want to name. Look, he said, pointing to a ledger bound in cracked leather, its pages yellowed and curling at the edges. I snatched it up, the spine groaning as I opened it, revealing entries in Grandmother Ashworth's precise hand. dates from 1852 onward, lists of births and absorptions. My stomach twisted. Eliza, born March 7th, absorbed on the 8th. Purity retained. The words blurred, but the pattern was clear. Each newborn, each gift consumed not out of madness but ritual, a desperate bid to hold on to innocence in a world that stripped it away. A low rumble echoed from the far wall like stones shifting in their sleep. Elias froze, his face paling. "Did you hear that?" I shushed him, heart pounding, and crept forward, the lantern's glow revealing an alcove shrouded in cobwebs. There, etched into the rock, were symbols, circles intertwined with thorns, and below them a shallow basin stained dark, crusted with what might have been salt or blood long dried. I traced the carvings with my finger, feeling a chill that seeped into my bones. This wasn't just family lore. It was a pact whispered through generations, mothers devouring their young to absorb their purity, to arm themselves against the cruelties of frontier life. The fevers, the losses that claimed husbands and homes alike, but why? The journal upstairs hinted at a curse, something tied to the land we tilled. The Illinois soil that yielded bountiful crops but demanded a toll in flesh. Elias tugged at my sleeve. "We should go back. Pa's waiting, and if he finds out—" His words trailed off as another rumble shook the floor, dust sifting from the ceiling like fine ash. I pulled him behind a crate, snuffing the lantern just as a sliver of light pierced the darkness. Not from above, but from a crack in the wall, widening slowly with a grind of stone on stone. My breath caught. Through the gap, I glimpsed a chamber beyond, lit by bioluminescent fungi clinging to the walls, their glow ethereal, almost holy. In the center stood a figure shrouded in a tattered shawl, kneeling before a crude altar piled with bones, small, fragile bones that no child should recognize. "Stay here," I hissed to Elias, slipping through the fissure before he could protest. The air in this inner sanctum was warmer, thick with the scent of decay masked by lavender. The figure turned and I stifled a gasp. It was Cousin Beatrice, her face gaunt, eyes hollowed by whatever shadows haunted her since her own babe went still last winter. "Mary," she rasped, rising unsteadily. "You shouldn't be here. The purity. It's not for the living to judge." She clutched a bundle to her chest, swaddled in linen, and I realized with horror that it moved faintly, a mewling cry escaping the folds. I stepped closer, pulse thundering in my ears. "Beatrice, what have you done? The family's madness ends tonight." She laughed, a brittle sound that echoed off the stones. "Madness? It's survival. The land takes, so we take back. Eat the pure, become pure, resist the rot that claims us all." Her hands shook as she unwrapped the bundle, revealing not a child, but a doll carved from bone and wax, its eyes glinting with embedded stones. A decoy? No, the real horror was in her eyes, the conviction that blurred the line between ritual and delusion. Elias's voice pierced the tension from the crack. "Ma!" Footsteps pounded above, Pa no doubt roused by our absence. Beatrice lunged, not at me but at the altar, smashing the doll against it in a spray of shards. The ground heaved, cracks spiderwebbing the floor, and a wail rose from the depths, ancient and hungry. I grabbed her arm, pulling her toward the fissure as the chamber began to collapse, stones tumbling like judgments from on high. We scrambled through, Elias hauling us out, the wall sealing behind with a final thunderous seal. Gasping in the outer cellar, I held Beatrice as she sobbed, the weight of unspoken sins crashing down. The family secret wasn't just in the eating. It was in the endless cycle, the purity we chased devouring us instead. But as Pa's boots thumped down the stairs, lantern in hand, I knew the real burial had just begun. The bones in that chamber wouldn't stay hidden forever, and neither would the truth we'd unearthed. Elias met my gaze, his youthful caution hardening into resolve. We'd face it together. I gripped the rusted latch of the cellar door, my knuckles white against the splintered wood, as the wind howled through the cracks like a living thing. Below, the air hung thick with the metallic tang of blood and earth, and I could hear the faint rhythmic scraping. Elias, digging again, his breaths ragged in the lantern's dim glow. Mother Ashworth's voice echoed up from the darkness, soft and insistent. "Purity demands sacrifice, child. Come, see what we've preserved." My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the gnawing certainty that tonight, the family's secret would claim another soul, or mine. Elias straightened when I descended the creaking stairs, his face gaunt under the flickering light, shovel in hand like a grim scepter. The pit he'd widened gaped in the corner, lined with burlap sacks stained dark, and beside it lay the bundle, small, still, wrapped in a calico cloth that had once been my sister's favorite. "It's time," he muttered, wiping sweat from his brow, his eyes avoiding mine. Brave as he tried to be, his hands trembled. The eldest brother, always the protector, now reduced to this ritual's reluctant executioner. I knelt beside the bundle, the chill seeping through my skirts, and unwrapped it slowly. The infant's face was pale, unmarred, as if sleep had only just claimed it. Hours old, birthed in secrecy under the harvest moon. Mother hovered at the edge, her silhouette sharp against the lantern, her once vibrant hair now streaked with gray from years of these absorptions. She wasn't the monster the town whispered of. No, her eyes held a fervent light, the kind born of desperation after father's death left us starving on this forsaken Illinois farm. "The purity," she whispered, kneeling to trace a finger along the child's cheek. "It flows strongest in the fresh ones. Eat, and it becomes us. Stronger against the blight, the debts, the endless winters." Her voice cracked, earnest, as if explaining a harvest prayer rather than this unholy rite. I swallowed bile, remembering the last time. Aunt Clara, her body racked with fever after refusing, buried unmarked while Mother grew inexplicably hale. The scraping resumed as Elias turned back to the pit, but I placed a hand on his arm, halting him. "This one's different," I said, my voice steady despite the storm inside. Cautious Lila, always the one to question, to weigh the cost. The infant stirred faintly, a gasp escaping its tiny lips. Not dead, but drugged with the laudanum Mother brewed from the wild poppies. Stakes rose sharp in my chest. If we proceeded, the family endured another season, but at what fracture? The rival miller from town had been sniffing around our land, rumors of our odd ways reaching his ears. One slip, and we'd lose everything, or worse, face the law's noose. Elias met my gaze, witty spark dimmed to doubt. "What now, then?" Let it cry and draw them here. Tension coiled as Mother leaned in, her breath hot on my neck, urging the knife from her apron. Dull, but serviceable for the act. The plan had always been swift. Sever, consume the heart for vitality, bury the rest to return to the soil. But tonight, with the child's pulse fluttering under my palm, it backfired in my mind's eye. Visions of blood on the stairs, Elias's shovel slipping, the miller's men arriving at dawn to our screams. I snatched the knife instead, not to cut but to slice the binding cords on the child's wrists, freeing its limbs. "No more," I hissed, wrapping it tighter in the cloth. Mother's face twisted, not in rage but betrayal, earnest faith crumbling. "You'll doom us all, girl." "The purity." Elias dropped the shovel with a clang that echoed like judgment stepping between us. "She's right. The blight's in the soil, not the sin. We've adapted before. Remember the root cellars we dug last spring? We smuggle grain from the river traders, not this." His voice rose, argumentative under pressure, but laced with the camaraderie that had bound us through lean years. We moved as one then. I cradled the child, its warmth a fragile spark, while Elias shoveled dirt over the pit to seal the evidence. Mother resisted at first, clutching at my sleeve, but her grip weakened as the first wail pierced the air, life asserting itself. We ascended together, the cellar door slamming shut behind, the wind outside carrying away the last echoes of our old ways. Dawn broke gray over the fields, the miller's cart rumbling distant on the road. But we were ready, Elias bartering what tools we had, I nursing the child in the hidden loft, Mother silent but stirring a pot of actual porridge, her hand steadier than in months. The cost lingered. The family's purity myth shattered, trust frayed like old rope, and the land still barren. Yet in that earned quiet, as the infant's cries softened to gurgles, I felt the real absorption. Not of flesh, but of resolve. We'd survive, clever and together, the Ashworths remade in the light of day. The lantern's flame guttered in the draught, seeping through the cabin's warped floorboards, casting jagged shadows that danced like accusations across the walls. I clutched the knife tighter, its blade still warm from the cut, as Mother's labored breaths filled the room, ragged, insistent, as if she were drawing in more than air. Elias stood frozen by the door, his eyes wide but not with fear. No, it was that same hungry gleam I'd seen in her, the one that promised secrets worth any sin. "It's time," I whispered to myself, though the words tasted like ash. The bundle in my arms stirred faintly, a tiny fist uncurling against the blood-stained cloth, and I wondered if Purity could scream. Outside, the Illinois wind howled through the cornstalks, bending them like supplicants before a storm. Elias finally moved, his boots scuffing the dirt as he crossed to the table where the herbs lay scattered. Wolfsbane, nightshade, the bitter roots Mother swore bound the soul to flesh. "She can't wait forever, Clara," he said, voice low and steady, like he was coaxing a skittish horse. But I knew better. His hands trembled as he ground the leaves, the pestle clicking against the mortar in a rhythm that mocked my heartbeat. We'd buried 2 sisters already this season, their graves unmarked under the old oak. And now here I was, the last daughter, holding what might be our undoing. The family curse, Mother called it, absorbing the newborn's light to keep the darkness at bay. But whose darkness? Hers or the one creeping into all of us? I laid the child down on the quilt, its cries muffled by the swaddling, and stepped back, the knife slipping from my grip to clatter on the floor. Elias looked up, his face half lit, the scars from his own absorption years ago pulling tight across his cheek. "Don't falter now," he urged, but there was no conviction in it, only the echo of Father's old commands, the ones that drove him mad enough to hang himself from the rafters last winter. Mother groaned from the bed, her eyes fluttering open, milky with whatever poison lingered in her veins. "Give it to me," she rasped, reaching out with skeletal fingers. I hesitated, the air thick with the scent of iron and decay, and in that moment I saw it, the lie we'd all swallowed. The purity wasn't in the eating. It was in the refusal, the breaking of the chain. Elias poured the paste into a bowl, mixing it with the last of our milk, his movements precise but frantic. "If we don't, it'll take us all," he muttered, glancing at the window where the first gray light of dawn clawed at the horizon. The rival families from town had been whispering, their lanterns bobbing closer each night, drawn by rumors of our rituals. They'd come with pitchforks and Bibles calling us witches, but they didn't understand the hunger that bound us tighter than any blood oath. I knelt beside Mother, brushing the damp hair from her forehead, and for the first time I didn't feel the pull, the insatiable need that had claimed my aunts, one by one. "No more," I said, my voice cutting through the wind's wail. The child's cry sharpened, piercing, and Elias paused, the bowl tilting in his hand. He lunged then, not at me, but toward the bundle, his face twisted in desperation. I shoved him back, the force of it surprising us both, sending him sprawling against the table. Herbs spilled like dark confetti and the bowl shattered, milk pooling white against the blood. Mother sat up, a guttural laugh escaping her lips, not joy but the madness we'd all feared. "Foolish girl," she hissed, but her eyes locked on mine, searching, pleading. Elias scrambled to his feet, fists clenched, but he didn't advance. The air hummed with unspoken choices, the cabin walls seeming to close in as the distant shouts from the approaching townsfolk grew louder, their torches flickering like vengeful stars. I scooped up the child, holding it close to my chest, feeling its warmth seep through the cloth, a spark against the cold void inside me. Elias backed toward the door, his resolve cracking. "Clara, think of the purity. It's all we've got." But I was already moving, slipping the knife into my apron, the weight of it a promise. Mother reached for me one last time, her nails grazing my arm, drawing a thin line of blood. "You'll hunger for it," she warned, but her voice broke, weak as the dying flame. I didn't look back as I pushed past Elias, the door banging open to the chill morning. The cornfield stretched endless, hiding paths only I knew. And as the child's soft breath steadied against me, I ran. Not from them, but toward something untainted, the first real light in years. Behind the shout swelled, but they couldn't touch this, not anymore. The lantern's flame sputtered in the draft, casting jagged shadows across the root cellar's damp walls. I clutched the rusted shovel tighter, my knuckles white against the splintered handle as Mother's labored breaths echoed from the corner where she lay on the blood-soaked pallet. Eliza hovered nearby, her face pale as milkweed, whispering prayers that sounded more like curses under her breath. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of fresh birth and something fouler, the remnants of what we'd buried shallow just weeks before. "She's coming, Isaiah," Eliza said, her voice cracking like thin ice. She wiped sweat from her brow with a sleeve already stained dark. "The purity. It's twisting her from the inside. You saw what happened to Aunt Clara last harvest." I nodded, though my stomach churned at the memory. Clara's eyes glazing over, her hands clawing at her belly as if to rip out the sin she'd swallowed. The Ashworth way, Father had called it before the fever took him. A desperate grasp at salvation in this God-forsaken prairie. Eat the innocent to claim its light, keep the family's soul from the devil's grasp. But tonight, with the storm raging outside and the sheriff's lanterns flickering distant on the horizon, it felt like madness clawing back. Mother's scream ripped through the cellar, raw and animal. I dropped to my knees beside her, the shovel clattering against the dirt floor. The newborn, tiny, slick, already still in her trembling arms, stared up with unblinking eyes as if judging us all. "Do it," she gasped, thrusting the bundle toward me. "For us. For the bloodline." Eliza turned away, retching into the shadows, but I couldn't. My hands shook as I took the weight, so light it might have been a dream. The purity ritual demanded the mother consume it whole, absorb the child's uncorrupted essence to ward off the family's inherited curse. The whispers of madness that had claimed grandfather turned him to wandering the fields at night, raving about shadows that ate the stars. But mother's strength was gone. The consumption had weakened her these past months, left her frail as a autumn leaf. Outside, thunder cracked like a whip, and I swore I heard hooves pounding the mud. The posse closing in after the neighbors' accusations. They'd found the shallow graves behind the barn, unearthed the tiny bones we'd laid to rest with whispers of absolution. No time for tradition. My mind raced, piecing together the old stories Father told. If the mother couldn't, the eldest son must stand proxy, share the burden to bind the purity to the line. I raised the child to my lips, the chill of its skin pressing against me, and hesitated. Eliza's hand gripped my shoulder, her nails digging in. "Isaiah, don't, we run. Take her and go west like we planned." But Mother's eyes locked on mine, wild with fevered plea. "The curse. It'll take you next if we break it." Her words slurred, the purity already warring within her from the last birth. The cellar door rattled above, wind or worse. I bit down, the salt of tears mixing with the unthinkable act, swallowing the fragment of innocence in one choking gulp. Fire bloomed in my chest, a searing light that blinded me, promising clarity amid the horror. When my vision cleared, Mother smiled weakly, her color returning while Eliza sobbed silently. We had minutes, maybe less. I grabbed the shovel again, this time to dig and escape through the back wall toward the creek where the posse wouldn't follow in the dark. The purity surged in my veins, sharpening my senses, the distant shouts now clear, the soft earth yielding under the blade. But as we dragged Mother toward freedom, I felt it. The curse's shadow lingering, not banished, just deferred. One more secret to carry into the night. The lantern's flame flickered low in the damp cellar, casting jagged shadows across the Ashworth women's faces. Mother Eliza's eyes hollowed by years of ritual. Her daughters Clara and young Beatrice huddled close, their breaths ragged from the chase above. The sheriff's men had breached the farmhouse door at last, their boots thundering like Judgment Day. But down here, in the earth-scented heart of their secret, purity clung like the mud on our hems. I gripped the rusted knife, its blade still warm from the night's offering, and whispered to the shadows, "We've absorbed enough. It's time to become the storm they fear." Clara's hand trembled as she pressed it to the trapdoor's underside, listening to the muffled shouts filtering through the floorboards. "They'll burn it all, Ma, the purity. It'll be lost." Her voice cracked, not with fear, but with the fierce devotion I'd instilled since her first breath, the one I'd spared, unlike the others, to grow our strength. Eliza nodded, her gray hair matted with sweat, and traced the chalk sigils on the wall, symbols of the old ways we'd unearthed from grandfather's forbidden books. No more hiding in Illinois' endless cornfields. The world had sniffed us out, drawn by whispers of missing babes and the unnatural vigor in our steps. Beatrice, barely 10, clutched the swaddled bundle to her chest. The last newborn, not yet consumed, its tiny cries stifled by linen. "But the absorption, it makes us whole," she murmured, echoing my lessons. I knelt beside her, tasting salt on my lips from the earlier rite, the metallic tang that bound us. Outside, axes splintered wood. The air grew thick with smoke. We'd planned for this, tunnels dug years ago leading to the river's edge. But plans falter when purity demands sacrifice. Eliza's eyes met mine, steady as the Mississippi's current. "We run as one or not at all." She heaved the trapdoor's bolt and we spilled into the narrow passage, the earth swallowing our footfalls. The bundle squirmed in Beatrice's arms, a living ember of what we'd become. As the first flames licked the cellar stairs behind us, I felt it surge within. The absorbed essences, not curses but fire, propelling us forward. The sheriff's lanterns bobbed in pursuit, but we were already ghosts in the night, mothers forged in the unyielding forge of survival. By dawn, the river carried us south, the farmhouse a smoldering ruin on the horizon. Clara rode with arms that never tired. Beatrice hummed a lullaby to the child we'd protect now, not devour. Purity wasn't in the eating, I realized as the sun crested, gilding the water. It was in the choice to endure, to carry the light through the dark. The Ashworths would rise again, not in isolation, but woven into the world's hidden veins, our bond unbreakable, our hunger sated by the wild ahead.